Hey guys, thanks for coming back for another breakdown of Legion. This time we're doing episode 5. Hit the like button if you like the video. I'm doing today's episode alone because Ryan's in Mexico. Before we get into the episode though, I want to talk about last episode's YouTube comments. You guys are amazing. I learned things, I laughed, I cried a lot more than I laughed. We got a comment from Mackenzie Gray, the guy that plays the Eye. He pointed out that we left out one of his powers. I know what it is, Mackenzie. You can morph, or whittle really well, depending. Guys, this is the best nerd show on television right now. The cinematography is fantastic. The lighting has such amazing meaning. I think blue lighting is safety, and red lighting seems to be the devil with the yellow eyes, or one of his other personalities taking over. That presents itself in many ways. Sometimes, in episode 1, there's a corridor of red light that, a mouse hole that he goes through. The red table during the interview scene. The dog cage. There's all these subtle hints that the devil with the yellow eyes is just out of frame. This episode starts out with a very different David. He's confident and almost a little bit scary.
He makes his own reality now.
After last week's episode where you see the scene with him doing the head shaky thing, and then Lenny putting her arm over him, and you see that it's the devil with the yellow eyes, I think that David's not actually in control of his body the entirety of this episode. It's possible, but here's my reasoning. When he and Sid go into that little love palace he made for them, everything's white light, everything's pristine, everything's gorgeous, champagne and strawberries. But the strawberries are red. Even in this pristine place that David has made, there's red light creeping out from under a door. Maybe there is segregation. Maybe David is in control of that room. But regardless of that, there is corruption. Who's to say that the Shadow King's not in control of his body and just letting Sid and David have a little bit of fun in his head? Maybe David's confined to that room. I noticed something through the costuming between episode 3 and this episode. In episode 3, David's wearing a shirt with an arrow pointing over his shoulder, and he says, I don't know who's doing all of these things, while he's witnessing things in his brain with Melanie and Ptonomy. In episode 4, David's in turmoil. He's wearing a tornado on his shirt, and he's in arguments with Lenny. He's in the astral plane running from the devil with the yellow eyes. And then in this episode, the arrow is pointing straight at him. The devil with the yellow eyes has taken over. It is him. That is fantastic costuming. If that was on purpose, this is the best show on TV. I love it. I love it all. I love it so much. Let's go through David's powers. First of all, the liquefaction of walls that we've seen in other episodes. I don't really know what that is besides liquefaction. There's teleportation on a massive scale. He can even teleport objects. There's telekinesis. He can move objects. There's telepathy. He can project his body on the astral plane. He can cast like Zone of Silence, like a priest in Dungeons and Dragons.
Lightning bolt!
In this episode, Carrie discovers that the devil with the yellow eyes is actually a parasite. While looking at the EKG machine, Carrie sees that there's a separation. A young David is present in one frame, and the devil with the yellow eyes is present in another frame. I don't really know what this machine does, but from that, Carrie extrapolates that this thing is not David. David and Sid switch bodies. The devil with the yellow eyes takes over David's body with Sid's mind in it and liquefies the walls. David was no longer at the mental institution when his body did that. The devil with the yellow eyes stayed in his body with Sid, and that's why Sid can now see him. Boom.
Rainbows are visions, but only illusions. Rainbows have nothing to hide.
The devil with the yellow eyes comes into reality. The rainbow isn't an illusion. It's a real thing. David was telling Sid that the devil with the yellow eyes isn't made up. It's not just water and sunlight and something that she's just seeing. It's physical. It's something that's physically in David. And further evidence that there's something physically there, stay with me here. King, Lenny Benny, the angriest boy in the world, and Fat Neck with yellow eyes are all one thing. They're all one thing that's present. And I know that this was mentioned a lot in the YouTube comments, so I did a little bit of digging. In the Uncanny X-Men number 280, there's a fight between Legion and Professor Xavier. Legion has been taken over by an entity called the Shadow King. The Shadow King is a parasite. He's a super powerful being that can take over other mutants' bodies. In the process of the fight, Professor Xavier is killed, and the astral plane is destroyed. I'm not sure if it stays that way or if it's ever going to be referenced in the show, but that brings me to another point. This is probably the Shadow King. And if this is probably the Shadow King, at this point we've never seen David's father, and we find out that he's adopted. In the comic books, David is the progeny of Professor Xavier and a woman named Gabrielle Haller. Gabrielle Haller is a Holocaust survivor who's in a coma. So an interesting upbringing, potentially. I don't see that storyline carrying through, but I do see his father being a powerful telepath. So the ending brought with it a bunch of possibilities. I'm going to focus on only 3 because those are the only ones that I think could logically be real. One is when the Eye tries to shoot David and Sid, David pulls everyone into the astral plane for protection. 2, the demon with the yellow eyes pulls everyone into the astral plane to mess with them. Or 3, it's all been an illusion. Everything is really as it was at the end of this episode. I think that one is the biggest stretch, but that would be the coolest thing to see. If like, okay, now we're back to square one. Great. These jumpsuits are never going away. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Hit subscribe if you liked that. Next week, Ryan will be back from Mexico with a sunburn.